I never thought owning a snow plow business would turn me into the most hated person in Pinewood Heights. But here we are, watching a 50-something woman with blonde highlights screech at me about community standards while her BMW idles in 3 feet of unplowed snow. My name is Simon Crawford, and I have been running Crawford Snow Removal Services in northern Michigan for the past 8 years. The business started small, just me and an old Ford pickup with a plow attachment, clearing driveways for elderly neighbors in Traverse City. Now I have got a fleet of 6 trucks, 2 commercial-grade plows, and contracts with half the neighborhoods in Grand Traverse County. Or at least, I used to have those contracts. The trouble started in November 2025, right before Thanksgiving. I had just signed a seasonal contract with the Pinewood Heights Homeowners Association, a sprawling development of about 200 homes built around an artificial lake. The contract was straightforward. I would handle all snow removal for the community's private roads, which totaled roughly 4 miles of winding suburban streets. The HOA would pay me $12,000 for the season, with the understanding that I would clear the roads within 4 hours of any snowfall exceeding 2 inches. It seemed like easy money at first. Pinewood Heights was only 15 minutes from my house, and the roads were well designed with plenty of space to push snow to the sides. The HOA president, a woman named Patricia Kensington, had been pleasant enough during our initial meeting. She wore pearls with her cashmere sweater and spoke in that overly cheerful voice that wealthy suburban women seem to perfect. I should have recognized the warning signs. The first storm hit on December 3rd. 6 inches fell overnight, and I was out at 4 in the morning, plowing my commercial clients first before heading to Pinewood Heights. I arrived at 6:30, well within my 4-hour window, and spent the next 2 hours clearing their roads. Everything looked perfect when I finished. The snow was neatly piled on the sides, the roads were down to bare pavement, and I even cleared around the fire hydrants without being asked. 3 days later, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, but an actual physical letter on HOA letterhead, complete with an embossed seal that probably cost more than my truck payment. The letter informed me that I had violated Section 7.3 of the Community Standards by creating unsightly snow piles that exceeded the permitted height of 4 feet. I was being fined $500. I read the letter 3 times, convinced it was a joke. The snow piles were barely 3 feet high, well within their stated limit. I called Patricia immediately. "Pinewood Heights HOA, Patricia speaking," she answered, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Patricia, this is Simon Crawford. I just received a letter about a fine for snow pile heights. I am pretty sure I followed the guidelines exactly." There was a pause. "Mr. Crawford, the board reviewed photographic evidence and determined that several piles exceeded the allowable height. The fine stands. Can I see these photos?" Because I measured the piles myself and they were all under 4 feet. "The board's decision is final. You have 30 days to remit payment. Have a wonderful day." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the letter, feeling my blood pressure rise. $500 was not going to bankrupt me, but it was the principle. I had done the job correctly, and now they were inventing violations to squeeze more money out of me. I decided to let it go. Sometimes clients get weird about stuff, and fighting over $500 was not worth losing a $12,000 contract. I paid the fine and made a note to measure every single snow pile going forward. The second storm came on December 15th. This one was bigger, nearly 10 inches of heavy, wet snow. I got the call from my weather service at 2 in the morning and mobilized my crew immediately. We hit our priority clients first, the hospital access roads, the nursing home, the grocery store parking lots. By the time I made it to Pinewood Heights, it was 7 in the morning. Still within my 4-hour window, since the snow had not stopped falling until 4. I spent 3 hours on their roads, working carefully to keep the snow piles low and neat. I even brought my measuring tape and checked every major pile. The tallest one was 3 feet 8 inches. I took photos with my phone, timestamps and everything, just to cover myself. 4 days later, another letter arrived. This time I was being fined $750 for excessive response time creating hazardous conditions for residents. According to the letter, I should have arrived at the onset of snowfall rather than waiting until after the storm had ended. I did not even bother calling. I drove straight to Patricia's house, a massive colonial with white columns and a 3-car garage. I rang the doorbell and waited, my breath forming clouds in the December cold. Patricia opened the door wearing yoga pants and a fleece jacket, holding a mug of something that smelled like expensive coffee. "Mr. Crawford, I was not expecting you. We need to talk about this fine. My contract specifically says 4 hours after snowfall exceeding 2 inches. I was well within that time frame. She took a delicate sip of her coffee. The board interprets that clause to mean you should begin work as soon as snow begins accumulating, waiting until after the storm creates dangerous conditions. That is not what the contract says. And it is not how snow removal works. No one plows during an active storm if they can avoid it. You just have to plow again once it stops. Nevertheless, the board has voted and the fine stands. You are welcome to appeal at our next monthly meeting." She started to close the door. I put my hand on the frame, not aggressively, just enough to keep it open. "Patricia, what is really going on here? I am doing the job exactly as contracted. These fines are nonsense." Her pleasant expression finally cracked, revealing something cold underneath. "Mr. Crawford, the board expects a certain standard of service. If you cannot meet our expectations, perhaps we should consider other contractors." "Other contractors? I am the only snow removal service in the county that handles private communities this size." She smiled then, and it was not pleasant. "Then I suggest you work harder to meet our standards. Good day, Mr. Crawford." The door closed in my face. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. This was not about snow removal. This was about control, about putting me in my place. Patricia and her board had decided they could squeeze me for extra money, and there was nothing I could do about it without losing the contract entirely. I paid the second fine. But this time, I also did something else. I went home and read every single word of my contract with Pinewood Heights, plus their entire HOA bylaws, which was a 200-page document full of legalese about fence heights and approved paint colors. I read it all, highlighting sections, making notes, looking for any leverage I could find. What I found was interesting. The contract gave them the right to fine me for violations, but it also gave me the right to terminate with 30 days written notice. More importantly, the HOA bylaws had an entire section about community responsibilities versus contractor responsibilities. Snow removal on private roads was classified as a contracted service, which meant the HOA was responsible for ensuring it got done. But once they hired a contractor, they could not simply demand work beyond the contract terms without renegotiating. I also found something else buried in the contract. A clause that said if I was unable to perform services due to equipment failure, extreme weather conditions, or other acts of God, I had to notify the HOA within 12 hours, but would not be considered in breach of contract. And another clause that said either party could terminate with 30 days' notice. The third storm hit on Christmas Eve. 12 inches of perfect powder, falling steadily from noon until midnight. My phone was ringing off the hook with clients needing their driveways cleared for family gatherings. I worked straight through, my crew and I plowing through the night. I got to Pinewood Heights at 3 in the morning on Christmas Day. The neighborhood was dark and quiet, Christmas lights twinkling on houses, inflatable Santas sagging under the weight of fresh snow. I plowed for 4 hours straight, clearing every road, every cul-de-sac, every intersection. When I finished, the sky was just starting to lighten and I was exhausted. I went home, ate leftover Chinese food for Christmas breakfast and slept until 2 in the afternoon. When I woke up, I had 17 missed calls, all from Pinewood Heights residents, and one from Patricia. I called her back first. "You have any idea what you have done?" she shrieked, her pleasant facade completely gone. "You left snow all over the main entrance. People cannot get in or out." I sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. "What are you talking about? I plowed the entire community, including the main entrance. There is a 3-foot berm across the entrance from the county plow. You left it there." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "Patricia, that is not my responsibility. The county plows the public road, and they always leave a berm at private entrances. Property owners are responsible for clearing that. You are our snow removal contractor for your private roads. The entrance from County Road 17 to your community is not part of my contract. That is the property line. You want me to clear that? We need to amend the contract. You will get here immediately and clear this entrance, or I will fine you $10,000. Now I was angry. "You will do no such thing. That work is not in my contract, and you cannot fine me for not doing work I was never contracted to do. Read the agreement, Patricia." She made a sound like a furious tea kettle. "We will see about that, Mr. Crawford. The board will hear about this." She hung up. I knew I should probably just go clear the entrance, keep the peace, add it to the bill later. But I was tired of being pushed around. I had done my job exactly as specified, and I was not going to be bullied into doing extra work for free. The letter that arrived on December 27th was not a fine. It was a notice of contract termination, effective immediately, citing gross negligence and failure to maintain community access. They were also demanding a full refund of the seasonal payment, minus the fines I had already paid. I called my lawyer, a guy named Robert Chen who handled contracts for small businesses. He read everything I sent him, listened to my story, and then laughed. "They cannot do this," he said. "They can terminate with 30 days' notice, but not immediately unless you actually breach the contract. And they definitely cannot demand a refund for work you already performed. Plus, those fines are bogus. We could fight this." "How long would fighting it take?" "Months, maybe a year if it goes to court. You would probably win, but it would cost you time and money." I thought about it. About Patricia's smug face. About being nickel and dimed with fake fines. About being screamed at for not doing work that was not my responsibility. And then I had an idea. "Robert, the termination notice says effective immediately, right?" "Yes, but that is not actually legal under the contract terms. But they think it is, and they just fired me, which means I do not work for them anymore. Technically, you are still under contract for 30 more days, whether they like it or not. But what if I accepted their termination? What if I sent them a letter saying I agree to end the contract immediately?" There was a pause. "Then you would not be their contractor anymore. Why would you want that?" "Because I am curious what happens to their roads when nobody plows them." Robert laughed again. "Oh, that is evil. I like it. But you do realize they will just hire someone else. They said it themselves. I am the only service around here that handles communities this size. Anderson's plowing only does residential driveways. Lakeside Snow is booked solid. The county does not touch private roads. They would have to bring someone in from Cadillac or Petoskey, and that would cost them triple. So you are going to let them twist in the wind. I am going to let them live with the consequences of their decisions. Can you draft me a letter accepting their immediate termination? With pleasure. The letter went out on December 28th. By December 30th, we got hit with another storm. 8 inches of heavy snow, the kind that is a nightmare to plow because it is half ice. My crew and I worked through the day, hitting all our remaining clients. We drove right past the entrance to Pinewood Heights, where the snow was already piling up, and I did not even slow down. My phone started ringing that evening. Pinewood Heights residents, asking when I was coming. I politely explained that the HOA had terminated my contract, and they needed to contact the board about alternative arrangements. Most of them were confused. A few were angry, but not at me. Word was apparently getting around that Patricia had fired me over something stupid. On New Year's Eve, Patricia called. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mr. Crawford, we need to discuss reinstatement of your contract." I put her on speaker and leaned back in my chair. "I am sorry, Patricia, but you terminated our agreement. I have already adjusted my schedule for the season. We are prepared to overlook your previous violations and start fresh." "That is generous, but I am not interested." Her voice went sharp. "Mr. Crawford, this community needs snow removal services. Then you should probably find a contractor. Have you tried Lakeside Snow? They are booked. So is everyone else in the area. That is unfortunate. I hope you figure something out. You cannot do this. We will sue you for breach of contract. For breach of a contract you terminated." "Good luck with that. My lawyer would love to see you try." I hung up. The next storm came on January 5th, 10 inches. Then another on January 8th, 6 inches. The snow was piling up in Pinewood Heights, and I heard through the grapevine that residents were getting furious. Some were trying to plow the main roads themselves with their pickup trucks, but they did not have proper equipment. The roads were a mess of packed snow and ice, with barely enough room for one car to pass. The HOA sent out an email blast, which one of the residents forwarded to me, explaining that they were experiencing temporary difficulties with snow removal and asking residents to be patient and understanding. They also announced an emergency special assessment of $500 per household to cover the cost of bringing in a contractor from out of town. That went over about as well as you would expect. The resident who forwarded me the email also sent a long message explaining that people were calling for Patricia's resignation. Apparently, she had not told the board about the fine situation or her decision to immediately terminate my contract. She had acted unilaterally, and now the entire community was suffering for it. On January 10th, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Crawford, this is David Martinez. I am on the Pinewood Heights HOA board." "Hello, David. What can I do for you?" "I want to apologize for how this situation has been handled. Several board members, myself included, were not aware of the circumstances that led to the termination of your contract. We have been reviewing the documentation, and it is clear that you were fulfilling your obligations." "I appreciate you saying that. I am calling to ask if you would be willing to reinstate the contract. We would void all previous fines and pay an additional premium for the inconvenience." I considered it. Part of me wanted to just take their money and move on. But another part of me, the part that had been insulted and pushed around and treated like hired help that should just shut up and take it, wanted them to really understand what they had done. "David, I appreciate the offer, but I need to be honest with you. My issue is not with the board. It is with Patricia. She abused her authority, invented violations to extract fines, and then fired me for refusing to do work outside my contract. Until she is no longer in a position to pull that kind of thing, I am not willing to work for Pinewood Heights. There was a long silence. I understand. For what it is worth, there is going to be a special board meeting next week. Several homeowners have filed complaints, and there will likely be a vote regarding her position. Then maybe we can talk after that meeting. Fair enough. Thank you for your time, Mr. Crawford. The storm on January 13th was the worst of the season. 16 inches of snow driven by 40-mile-per-hour winds, creating drifts that were waist-high in places. It was a true Michigan blizzard, the kind that shuts down schools and closes highways. I worked for 20 straight hours, my crew and I pushing through exhaustion to keep our clients safe and mobile. We did not go anywhere near Pinewood Heights. I heard later that the community was completely impassable. The out-of-town contractor they had hired refused to come in blizzard conditions. Residents could not get in or out. Someone's elderly mother had a medical emergency, and the ambulance got stuck trying to reach the house. Firefighters had to use a snowmobile to get to her. She was fine, ultimately, but it scared everyone badly. The special board meeting happened on January 15th. David called me that evening. Patricia has resigned, effective immediately. The board voted unanimously to accept her resignation and issued a formal apology to you and to the community. We would very much like to discuss reinstating your contract with revised terms that prevent this kind of situation from happening again. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. What kind of revised terms? Full payment for the season, no penalties or fines without documented evidence and approval by majority board vote, and a clear scope of work that defines exactly what is and is not your responsibility. We will also pay a bonus of $5,000 to compensate for the trouble. And who would I be dealing with on a day-to-day basis? I am taking over as interim president until the spring election. You would work with me. David had been reasonable and respectful. More importantly, Patricia was gone. The petty tyrant who had caused all this trouble had finally faced consequences. All right, I said. Let us draw up a new contract. The paperwork was finalized on January 18th. I started plowing Pinewood Heights again on January 20th, when another 6 inches fell. The roads were a disaster after 3 weeks of inadequate snow removal. It took me and my entire crew 2 full days to get them back to acceptable condition. The HOA paid my standard emergency rate without complaint, but the story does not end there. Because in February, I got a call from the Michigan Attorney General's office. Mr. Crawford, this is Investigator Jennifer Walsh. I am calling about Pinewood Heights HOA. We have received several complaints about financial irregularities, and your name came up in our investigation. My stomach dropped. What kind of irregularities? That is what we are trying to determine. Would you be willing to come in and discuss your experience with the HOA board, specifically regarding fines and fees? I met with Jennifer at her office in Lansing 3 days later. She was in her 40s, sharply dressed, with the kind of direct manner that made it clear she did not waste time. I told her everything about the fake fines, Patricia's behavior, the contract termination. Did you keep documentation? She asked. All of it. Every letter, every email, photos, measurements, the works. I am going to need copies of all that. Mr. Crawford, you are not the only contractor who experienced this. We have complaints from the landscaping company, the pool maintenance service, and the security patrol contractor. All of them reported being hit with excessive fines for minor or invented violations. So this was a pattern. It appears so. We are also looking into how the fine money was handled. HOA funds are supposed to be tracked and accounted for. We have reason to believe Patricia Kensington was not depositing the fine payments into the HOA accounts. It took me a moment to understand what she was implying. You think she was keeping the money? We think it is possible. That is what we are investigating. Over the next month, I provided the Attorney General's office with everything I had. The investigation expanded, and other contractors came forward with similar stories. The landscaping company had been fined $3,000 over the summer for unauthorized pruning of bushes they had been explicitly told to trim. The pool service had been hit with $2,000 in fines for chemical imbalances that independent testing showed did not exist. In March, the story broke in the Traverse City Record Eagle. Patricia Kensington had been embezzling from the Pinewood Heights HOA for nearly 3 years. The fake fines were just part of it. She had also been inflating invoices, creating fake vendors, and writing checks to herself disguised as community expenses. In total, she had stolen over $200,000. The criminal charges came down in April: embezzlement, fraud, larceny. Patricia was arrested at her home, which was apparently mortgaged to the hilt despite her wealthy appearance. Turned out all those pearls and that BMW were funded by stolen HOA money. Her trial was scheduled for September. David Martinez called me when the news broke. I do not even know what to say. We trusted her. She was our president for 5 years. She was good at looking the part, I said. That is how people like that operate. They count on everyone being too polite or too busy to question them. Well, the community wants to thank you. If you had not pushed back, if you had just paid those fines and moved on, we might never have caught her. I just wanted to plow snow and get paid fairly for it. Sometimes that is all it takes, standing up when everyone else is too intimidated. The rest of the season was uneventful. I plowed when it snowed. The HOA paid my invoices on time, and everyone was professional and courteous. Pinewood Heights even gave me a bonus at the end of the season as an additional apology for the trouble. Patricia's trial happened in September, just as the weather was starting to turn cold again. I was called as a witness and testified about the fake fines and her threats. So did several other contractors. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 5 years in prison, with restitution ordered to the HOA and all the contractors she had defrauded. I got a check for $1,250 in October, representing the return of my fine payments plus interest. It felt good to deposit it, but mostly I was just relieved the whole mess was over. The real satisfaction came in November, when the snow started falling again, and I went back to Pinewood Heights with my plow. David was still president, having won the spring election. He met me at the entrance with coffee and a handshake. "Good to have you back, Simon. Good to be back. We have got a new policy, by the way. All fines have to be approved by majority board vote, with documented evidence presented at a regular meeting. No more unilateral decisions." Sounds reasonable. It is what we should have had all along. We just did not realize we needed protection from our own president. I sipped the coffee and looked out at the snow-covered roads waiting to be cleared. Most people do not expect the person in charge to be the problem. That is how people like Patricia get away with it for so long. Well, not anymore. Not in this community. I spent that morning plowing Pinewood Heights, and this time it felt different. Not like a battle or a test, just like a job. A good job that paid fairly and treated me with respect. Which was all I had wanted in the first place. The story made the rounds in the snow removal community. I got calls from other contractors asking how I had handled it, sharing their own horror stories about nightmare clients and abusive HOAs. Most of them had just eaten the losses and moved on. But a few of them started pushing back, demanding proper documentation, refusing to pay bogus fines. Word got around that contractors did not have to just take whatever HOAs wanted to dish out. I also got contacted by a reporter from a national news site who wanted to do a story about HOA abuse and contractor rights. I declined. I had never wanted to be the face of some movement. I just wanted to run my business and be treated fairly. But I did agree to let her use my story anonymously, and the article that ran in December was pretty good. It talked about how HOAs sometimes abuse their authority, particularly with contractors who feel like they cannot fight back without losing business. The article generated a lot of discussion online. Some people thought HOAs were unnecessary tyranny, little kingdoms for petty dictators. Others defended them as necessary for maintaining property values and community standards. I fell somewhere in the middle. HOAs could be useful for managing shared resources and maintaining common areas. But they needed oversight, accountability, and clear rules that prevented any one person from wielding too much unchecked power. Patricia's case became something of a cautionary tale in HOA circles. I heard from David that other communities in the area had started reviewing their financial controls and governance procedures, making sure they had protections against the kind of embezzlement she had pulled off. Some good came out of it, at least. As for me, I kept plowing snow. The winter of 2026 was brutal, with storm after storm rolling through northern Michigan. But I was ready for it, my crew was experienced, and my equipment was solid. Pinewood Heights was one of my best clients, always paid on time, never complained about nonsense, and treated me like a professional partner rather than hired help they could push around. On a cold February morning, after plowing through the night, I stopped at the Pinewood Heights entrance and looked at the neat, clear roads stretching through the community. Every street was accessible, every intersection safe, every driveway entrance clear. This was what the job was supposed to look like when everyone involved just did their part without drama or power plays. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Roads look great as always. Invoice approved, payment processing tomorrow. Thanks for everything. Simple, professional, respectful. That was all any contractor wanted. I put the truck in gear and headed home as the sun came up over the frozen lake, painting everything in shades of pink and gold. The snow would keep falling, the winters would keep coming, and I would keep plowing. But now, I knew something important that I had not fully understood before. Sometimes standing your ground, even when it costs you in the short term, is the only way to make things right in the long run. Patricia had counted on me being too afraid of losing the contract to fight back. She had counted on everyone being too intimidated or too polite to question her. And for a while, it had worked. But the moment I decided I would rather lose the contract than be bullied, everything changed. The balance of power shifted. And when I stopped caring about appeasing her, she lost the only leverage she had. It was a lesson that applied to more than just snow removal. Any time someone has power over you, whether it is a boss, a client, or an HOA president with delusions of authority, they can only push you around if you let them. The moment you are willing to walk away, the moment you decide your self-respect is worth more than their money, they lose their power. That did not mean being reckless or burning bridges unnecessarily. I had tried to work within the system first, had followed the rules, had done the job correctly. But when it became clear that no amount of compliance would satisfy Patricia, because the problem was her, not my work, I had to make a choice. And I chose not to play her game anymore. The legal system had done its part. Patricia was in prison, the stolen money was being returned, and the community had learned a hard lesson about oversight and accountability. But the personal victory, the one that mattered most to me, was simpler than that. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be pushed around. And I had shown that contractors were not second-class citizens who had to accept whatever treatment clients wanted to dish out. We provided valuable services. We deserved to be treated with respect, and we had rights that could not just be trampled because someone had a little bit of authority. The next few months passed smoothly. Spring came, the snow melted, and I switched my business focus to landscaping and grounds maintenance, the other side of Crawford services that kept us busy in the warmer months. Pinewood Heights hired me for that too, a new contract with clear terms and fair pay. I saw Patricia's husband once at the grocery store in May. He looked haggard and defeated, pushing a cart with generic brands and budget items. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered how Patricia had threatened me, had tried to cheat me, had abused her position to steal from an entire community. He had to have known something was wrong, had to have seen the money flowing through their accounts. Maybe he was a victim too, or maybe he had just chosen not to look too closely at where the luxury came from. I nodded to him politely and moved on. It was not my place to judge him. The legal system had dealt with Patricia, the community had moved forward, and I had my business to run. Summer was busy, fall was beautiful, and before I knew it, winter was approaching again. David called in October to discuss the snow removal contract for the upcoming season. Same terms as last year, I asked. Actually, we would like to add the entrance clearing to the contract. What you said about the county plow leaving a berm was absolutely right. It is technically our responsibility, and we should have been paying you to handle it all along. I can do that. I will send over an amended proposal. Perfect. And Simon, I just want to say again how much we appreciate you. You could have left us hanging last winter, could have really made us suffer, but you came back when we made things right. I am not in the business of punishing people who own their mistakes and fix them. Patricia was the problem. Once she was gone, there was no reason we could not work together. Well, we are grateful. This community is better because you stood up when someone needed to. As I hung up, I thought about that. I had never set out to be some kind of hero or crusader. I had just wanted to be treated fairly, but sometimes that was enough. Sometimes one person refusing to accept abuse was all it took to crack open a whole system of corruption. The snow started falling in November, right on schedule. I was ready, my crew was ready, and Pinewood Heights got the best snow removal service in Grand Traverse County. Because when you treat people with respect, when you pay them fairly and hold up your end of the agreement, you get their best work. It was a simple principle that Patricia had never understood, but the new board got it. David got it, and the community thrived because of it. I plowed through another Michigan winter, watching the snow pile up and melt and pile up again, the endless cycle that defined life in the North. Every storm was a challenge, every clear road a small victory, and through it all, I knew I had done the right thing. Because in the end, standing up for yourself is not about revenge or spite. It is about drawing a line and saying, "This is where my dignity lies," and you do not get to cross it just because you have a title or a contract or a little bit of power. Patricia learned that lesson the hard way, in a prison cell. Pinewood Heights learned it too, when their roads stayed buried because they had driven away the one person who could clear them. And I learned that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose. The legal restitution checks kept coming, small amounts from Patricia's prison wages. $5 one month, $10 the next. It would take her decades to pay back what she had stolen. But every check was a reminder that actions have consequences, that you cannot just take what you want and expect to get away with it forever. I framed the first check, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. Justice, accountability, and the idea that even small contractors like me had rights that mattered. It hung in my office, where I could see it every day, a reminder of the winter when I let the roads stay buried and changed everything. Years from now, people in Pinewood Heights would still tell the story. About the HOA president who went to prison, about the contractor who stood his ground, about the winter when the roads did not get plowed. The details would blur and change the way stories do, but the core would remain. Sometimes you have to be willing to let everything fail to prove a point. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to stop participating in it. And sometimes, the person with the least power finds a way to win by simply refusing to lose anymore. I never wanted to be part of a story like this. I just wanted to plow snow and make an honest living. But life does not always give you what you want. Sometimes it gives you what you need instead. And what I needed was to learn that my work had value, that I deserved respect, and that no amount of money was worth sacrificing my dignity. The snow kept falling, the seasons kept turning, and I kept working. But now, I did it with the confidence of someone who knows their worth. And that made all the difference.